I had never been the kind of person who enjoyed camping. Bugs, damp clothes, and the constant smell of smoke clinging to your hair were enough to make me prefer four walls and a locked door. But my friends insisted, and against my better judgment, I said yes. The forest was deep and quiet, the kind of quiet that felt older than language. Tall pines leaned over us, their tops vanishing into a darkening sky. By the time we pitched our tents and built a fire, the sun was gone, and the night wrapped itself around us. I remember staring into the flames, trying to focus on the warmth and the laughter of my friends. But the trees were always there, pressing closer, as if listening. "Hey, Anna, you're spacing out," Mark teased, tossing a marshmallow at me. It stuck briefly to my sleeve before falling into the dirt. Everyone laughed. I smiled, but it felt hollow. I kept glancing into the dark line of the woods. The longer I looked, the more I thought I saw movement. Branches shifting when there was no wind, shadows crossing where no one walked. When the fire finally burned low, we drifted to our tents. The others fell asleep quickly, but I couldn't. I lay on my back, staring at the thin fabric ceiling, every sound amplified. The scratch of insects, the occasional snap of a twig outside. Then I heard it. "Anna!" My heart stopped. It wasn't just a voice, it was my mother's voice. The sound came softly at first, from somewhere just beyond the tree line, the exact tone she used when waking me as a child, the exact way she stretched the second syllable of my name. But my mother had been dead for 6 years. I froze, barely breathing. The voice came again. "Anna, come here." The air inside the tent felt suddenly suffocating. I unzipped the flap just enough to peek out. The fire was nothing but embers, glowing faintly. The others' tents were still. And then I saw her, a figure standing between the trees where the shadows were thickest. The outline was unmistakable. Short, slight shoulders, hair falling in loose waves. My mother. I wanted to scream, but my throat was locked. My hands trembled as I crawled out of the tent, my bare feet sinking into the cold dirt. I didn't even grab a flashlight. "Mom?" My voice cracked. The figure shifted slightly, as if leaning closer without moving its legs. The trees seemed to ripple around it. "Anna!" I took a step forward before I realized what I was doing. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, but something deeper, a pull I couldn't resist, kept urging me closer. The night swallowed every sound but her voice. "Anna, don't be afraid." The words sank into me like they belonged, like I had been waiting years to hear them again. Behind me, someone stirred in their tent, fabric rustling. I turned instinctively, breaking the line of sight for a moment. When I looked back, the figure was gone. Only the trees remained, still and silent. I stood there shivering, dirt sticking to my soles, my breath clouding in the air. Finally, I stumbled back into my tent and zipped it closed with shaking hands. My pulse refused to calm for hours. At some point, exhaustion took me, but the voice followed me into sleep. The morning came with an almost painful brightness. The fire pit was nothing but gray ash, and the smell of damp earth lingered in the air. I sat outside my tent, hugging my knees, pretending I'd slept. But my friends noticed. "You look like you saw a ghost," Lisa said, squinting at me as she tied her hair back. I forced a laugh. Didn't sleep well. That was true enough. But I didn't tell them about the voice or the figure. I knew how it would sound. Grief, memory, imagination. I'd been told before that sometimes the mind replays the past too vividly. Still, as the others made coffee over the little camp stove, Mark frowned at the ground near my tent. "What the hell?" he muttered. I turned. In the dirt were footprints. Bare footprints. Small, narrow, my size. They started right outside my tent flap and trailed off toward the woods. I couldn't breathe. My mouth opened, but no words came out. "Anna," Mark said, half joking, half serious, "did you go for a midnight stroll?" I shook my head too quickly. No, I didn't. The footprints were fresh, clear imprints of toes pressed into the soil. They led away from camp, winding between the trees. Everyone fell silent, following them with their eyes. Maybe someone's messing with us," Lisa suggested, but her voice was weak. We followed the trail, step after step, deeper into the forest. My stomach twisted tighter with each one, because I already knew where they would lead. After maybe 15 minutes, the prints grew harder to see as the ground became rockier. We pushed through a line of tall ferns, and then suddenly, there it was, the edge. A sheer drop. A cliff overlooking the valley below. Trees stretching out endlessly like an ocean of green. The footprints ended right at the edge. No more. Just gone. The others stood there, whispering, trying to explain it away. Wind, erosion, a trick of the light. But I stared at the empty space beyond the cliff, the way the air seemed to hum faintly, almost like a voice carried on the breeze. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw her again, not standing among the trees this time, but just beyond the edge, in the air itself. Her face half hidden in shadow, her hand reaching out. "Anna," I stumbled back, shaking my head, squeezing my eyes shut. When I opened them, the space was empty, just the endless drop and the sound of wind moving through the pines. The others turned back eventually, laughing nervously, talking over each other, insisting there had to be some rational explanation. But I walked in silence, my bare feet aching, though I didn't remember ever taking off my shoes. That night, when we packed to leave, I lingered one last time at the tree line. The forest waited, patient, silent, and somewhere between the trees, soft as breath, I thought I heard her again. "Anna, come home." I had walked that forest path every day since I was a child. The route from my friend's house to mine was familiar, lined with birch trees and the occasional flicker of sunlight through the branches. It was comforting, predictable, safe, until tonight. The air was colder than usual, and the fog crept low, curling around the roots of trees like ghostly fingers. I kept my pace steady, hands deep in my pockets, trying to ignore the sound of my own footsteps echoing against the damp earth. That's when I saw it, a narrow trail diverging from the main path, a path I had never noticed before. It didn't look like a recent clearing. The dirt was packed, as if many people had walked there. The edges were lined with moss-covered stones, and the trees leaned inward, forming a natural arch that almost beckoned me forward. My heart skipped a beat. Something about it was wrong. Every instinct screamed to turn back. But curiosity, that dangerous little whisper, pushed me ahead. Just a shortcut, I told myself, rationalizing the unease that crawled up my spine. I stepped onto the trail, the fog swallowing me almost immediately. At first, it seemed ordinary, but the deeper I went, the more I noticed subtle oddities. The trees seemed unnaturally close together, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. Every step I took was mirrored by the sound of another set of footsteps behind me. But when I looked back, there was nothing. Time felt wrong here. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. I recognized landmarks at first. The old oak, the fallen log I used to climb as a kid. But soon, the scenery repeated. I passed the same gnarled tree 3 times, the same mossy rock. Even the fog seemed to loop, curling the same way over and over, no matter which direction I turned. Panic started to settle in. I tried to turn back, to retrace my steps, but the path had shifted, it wasn't where it should have been. Every direction looked the same. The same narrow trail, flanked by twisted trees, disappearing into a white haze. I called out. My voice cracked, swallowed almost immediately by the fog. "Hello? Anyone?" No answer, except the whisper of the wind, or maybe footsteps just out of sight. My imagination? Maybe, but the feeling of being watched was undeniable. And then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the fog, a figure standing on the trail ahead. But the figure moved closer, stepping into the dim moonlight filtering through the branches. It looked like me. My own face, pale and frozen, eyes wide with fear, staring directly at mine. My heart pounded in my chest as I stumbled backward, trying to find another way out. But the trail was endless. Every turn led to the same sight, my double, waiting patiently, a mirror image with the same confusion etched onto its face. I ran, or at least I tried. Each step brought me back to that figure. Sometimes it was ahead, sometimes behind, always in sight, always moving with me. I couldn't tell if I was gaining or losing ground, if I was moving at all. And then I heard it, a voice, my voice, whispering from somewhere deeper in the forest. "You can't leave." The words were soft, almost gentle, but heavy with certainty. My breath came in ragged gasps. I turned to sprint, but my legs felt like lead, dragging me back to the trail. I stumbled into the fog, the forest twisting around me in impossible ways. And that's when I realized there was only one path, only one. No matter which way I turned, the trail curled back upon itself, leading me deeper into the heart of the forest, toward myself. I forced myself to stop, leaning against a tree as sweat and fog mingled on my skin. My double stood a few steps away, unmoving, silent. I could feel it watching, yet its eyes were hollow, not quite alive, not quite mine. Every instinct screamed to run, but my body wouldn't obey. I whispered, almost to myself, "What do you want?" The figure tilted its head, mimicking my gesture perfectly. My own words returned to me, not in my voice, but in that same eerie whisper. "You're already here." The fog thickened, curling around the trees like living smoke. I tried to turn, to leave, but the trail had changed again. Every familiar landmark had vanished. Even the moonlight seemed swallowed by the dense mist. The forest had become a maze, one that existed only to trap me. Then I saw it, another version of myself, emerging from the shadows behind a tree, and another, and another. Each one was identical, each step perfectly synchronized, each gaze fixed on me with a terrifying familiarity. Panic surged through me like fire, my heart hammering so hard I was sure the others could hear it. I stumbled forward, desperately searching for an exit, for anything recognizable. But the trail twisted impossibly, bending and looping, forming shapes that made no sense. I realized with a cold, sinking certainty, there was no leaving. The forest had become a mirror, reflecting me endlessly, distorting reality until there was nothing left but the trail and me. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, forming a chorus of my own voice. "Stay, stay, stay." I fell to my knees, covering my ears, but the sound was inside my head now, impossible to escape. And then, out of the fog, one of the doubles stepped closer. It raised a hand, and I instinctively raised mine to mirror it. My fingers touched the air, and I felt a cold, empty resistance. It wasn't flesh, it was nothing. A void shaped like me, moving exactly like me. I screamed, stumbling backward, and the trail beneath my feet seemed to pulse, shifting like liquid. The tree stretched taller, darker, their branches reaching out like claws. The forest was alive, and it had claimed me. I wanted to run, but I knew I couldn't. Every path led back to the same point, the center of the maze, where my doubles waited, patient and silent. Their eyes were mirrors reflecting my own fear. I could see every mistake I'd made, every wrong step, every choice that had led me here. The largest double stepped forward. Its lips moved, forming words I could almost hear. "You cannot leave," it said, perfectly in my voice. "You belong here, with us." I tried to scream again, but the sound died in my throat. My vision blurred as the fog closed in, swallowing me completely. Every instinct told me to fight, to run, to survive, but there was nothing to fight against. The trail had become part of me, and I had become part of the trail. And then, in the dimmest corner of my mind, I saw it, myself smiling. Not the fearful boy who had walked into the forest, but the me who had accepted it. The me who had always been here, waiting patient. The me who was finally home. I don't remember falling. I don't remember screaming. All I know is that when I looked up, I was standing at the edge of the trail. Or maybe I wasn't. Every step I take brings me back to that path, curling endlessly through the trees. And somewhere ahead, I see him, me, walking toward me, always smiling, always waiting. Now, when someone mentions the forest, I nod and smile politely. I never tell them about the trail that shouldn't exist. I don't warn them. Because I know that one day, someone else will find it, and the trail will claim them, just as it claimed me. And when I see them on the path, I walk toward them, smiling, waiting, patient. The forest always felt different at night. For teenagers like Mia, Alex, Jordan, and Claire, that difference was part of the thrill. Summer had stretched long and boring in their small town, so when Jordan suggested a hike deep into the woods, toward the hills nobody ever went, they all agreed. It was supposed to be harmless adventure, a story to laugh about later. But the further they walked, the quieter the forest grew. Even insects seemed reluctant to break the silence. The trees pressed close, their branches tangled like blackened fingers clawing at the fading daylight. When the last hint of sun slipped away, the group found it, a small cabin crouched between the pines. At first glance, it seemed abandoned. Moss ate at the roof, the wooden walls sagged with age, and the single window was smeared with grime. A rusted lantern hung crooked above the door, swaying faintly even though no wind stirred. "Creepy," Claire muttered, hugging her arms. "Let's go back." "Come on," Jordan grinned, always the boldest. "It's perfect." This is exactly the kind of thing people make scary stories about. Don't you want to see inside? Alex hesitated, but Mia, curious and restless, pushed forward first. The door groaned open, and a wave of stale air spilled out, thick with dust and something faintly metallic, like rust or dried blood. Inside, the cabin was dim. Their phone flashlights swept across walls crowded with hunting trophies, deer antlers, fox pelts, even the yellowed skull of a bear. Old rifles leaned in the corner, their barrels eaten by time. Then Mia froze. On a crooked shelf lay a stack of photographs. She picked one up carefully. The picture showed a girl, maybe 12, standing near the very cabin they were in. The photo was faded, the edges curled, but the girl's outline was disturbingly familiar. Claire leaned over her shoulder and gasped, That looks like you, Mia." The others crowded closer. The resemblance was undeniable. Alex flipped through the rest of the pile, his hands trembling. Every photo was similar. Kids posing near trees, on rocks, in clearings. Some wore clothes from decades ago, but in every one, there was something horribly wrong. "These are us," Alex whispered. His voice cracked. "That's me. Look at the scar on the chin. And Jordan, Claire! Oh God! Jordan tried to laugh, but the sound was thin and shaky. No way. It's maybe some trick. Someone edited these or something. But these weren't digital prints. They were old, developed on yellowing paper, long before any of them were born. And yet the faces were theirs. Mia's stomach twisted. The cabin suddenly felt colder. The walls seemed closer. Guys, Claire said quietly, what if we're not the first ones to come here? What if... She didn't finish. The night pressed against the windows. Somewhere outside, a branch snapped. They turned off their lights, holding their breath. For a moment, silence. Then came the sound of boots crushing leaves. Slow, heavy, measured. Someone, or something, was walking toward the cabin. Alex's voice was barely audible. We need to leave. Now. But the footsteps reached the porch. The lantern above the door trembled as if from a touch. Then, with a low creak, the door began to swing inward, though none of them had moved. In the doorway stood a figure. He was tall, wrapped in a patchwork of animal pelts that hung like ragged shadows. His face was gaunt, his eyes two pits of pale emptiness that reflected no light. In his hands, he clutched a crude spear tipped with bone. The teenagers didn't move, couldn't move. The man stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over them as though counting trophies. A faint smile curled his cracked lips, and in that moment they understood. He had never hunted animals. He had always hunted them. The air inside the cabin thickened, heavy with a silence that pressed against their lungs. The old hunter shut the door behind him without looking. The latch clicked, final and absolute. Jordan tried to speak first, his voice a brittle whisper. We didn't mean to trespass. We were just curious. The hunter tilted his head, bird-like. His eyes, empty hollows, lingered on Jordan's throat, as though measuring distance. Then, slow and deliberate, he set the bone-tipped spear against the wall. His hand brushed across the old photographs, caressing them almost tenderly, as if greeting familiar friends. Mia's mind raced. He knows us. He's always known us. Claire's knees buckled, and Alex grabbed her arm before she collapsed. The floorboards creaked too loud beneath them, and the hunter's head snapped toward the sound. His expression never changed, but a faint rasping breath escaped his lips. It might have been a laugh. He moved without hurry, yet every step filled the cabin with dread. His boots left faint damp marks on the dusty floor, as though he had come from someplace wet and black. He reached the far wall and picked up an axe, whose handle was worn smooth from years of use. Mia's chest clenched. Run, she mouthed, though no sound came out. Jordan shoved the door, but it wouldn't open. It was bolted from the inside. He turned, panicked. Windows! Alex smashed his flashlight against the glass. It cracked, but didn't break. The wood around it swollen with rot, but stubbornly holding. The hunter raised the axe, the blade catching their thin beams of light. And then he spoke. The voice was dry, broken, as though unused for decades. You always come back. The words rooted them to the floor. They weren't questions, but certainties. Mia's gaze darted to the photographs. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, layered with dust. Kids from different decades. Always the same faces. Their faces. The hunter wasn't finding new prey. He was waiting for the same ones to return, over and over. Jordan finally wrenched the window frame loose. The glass shattered outward, and he climbed through, cutting his arm on the shards. Claire scrambled after him, Alex right behind. Mia hesitated. The hunter stood only a few feet away, his face inches from hers now. the hollow eyes reflecting nothing. She felt the chill radiating off his skin, smelled the decay clinging to his furs. For one horrible instant, she swore she saw herself in his eyes. Not her reflection, but a faded version, decades older, trapped and screaming. A scream tore out of her throat, and she lunged for the window. The axe came down, slicing the air where her head had been a heartbeat before. She tumbled through the broken frame, hitting the ground hard. They ran. Branches clawed their arms, roots snagged their shoes, but none of them slowed. Behind them, the cabin door creaked open again. And though he never ran, the sound of boots followed, steady, patient, never falling behind. By the time they reached the road, their lungs burned raw. A passing truck's headlights blinded them, and they stumbled into its path, waving frantically. The driver slammed the brakes, horn blaring, before jumping out. "What the hell are you kids doing?" he shouted, but when they looked back at the tree line, the cabin was gone. No door, no lantern, no hunter. Just endless, silent forest. The driver cursed and ushered them into the truck, muttering about crazy town kids. None of them spoke a word the whole ride back. That night, Mia sat awake in her room, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. The others texted, each confirming the same thing. They couldn't sleep. Because on their phones, tucked between normal photos, they had all found the same new picture. Bold, faded, edges curled with time. 4 teenagers standing in front of a cabin, smiling. And behind them, half hidden in the shadows, a tall man in tattered furs.